Thank you for clicking on this video. This novel was made by manofcultureleon on webnovel. But let's stop wasting your time, so.
Shut up, clock in and load up.
Chapter 1, My Sixth Life, 5, that is how many times I have been reincarnated or transmigrated between worlds. Throughout my life, I have been a hero, a sage, an assassin, a demon lord, and a king, but all of them were cut short by a very irritating deity. He was the one that plucked me from my normal life as a college student and made me the hero to save a world on the brink of collapse. As the hero, I strove to provide safety, stability, and innovation to bring the world back from the edge. By the time I was 40 years old, I had managed to bring the people of the world together and was about to marry the women that helped me reach that point. As I stood at the altar watching my brides walk down the aisle, one of God's messengers, an angel named Angelo, took me away claiming that God needed me elsewhere. I could only stare at my loved ones in shock as I was pulled from that world, and cast into another as an infant. This trend would continue over and over, every time costing me everything I held dear. God never once showed me any sympathy or regret for ruining my life 5 separate times. I am done playing his games, I thought, standing before him yet again. Every damn time I work my ass off for the world, fall in love, and watch it all get taken from me. All I want is to finally have the happy ending I always wanted. Why is it so damn hard to let me have that? Well done, Charles, another world successfully saved. The god of reincarnation chuckled. That is 5 in a row, a new record by my count. You should be proud of yourself. Those worlds are better off because of your sacrifices. When do I get my happy ending? I seethed. You stole happiness from me yet again. I left 4 pregnant women alone to raise my children. How many times do you wish to see me suffer? I saved you from a life of changing diapers, dealing with naggy women, and dealing with heathens. You should be grateful to me, he shouted. I chose to live that way because I enjoyed it, I retorted. In every life, I found happiness with women I would have died for, but you stripped it from me. Yes, there were bound to be issues, but I would have faced them to spend my life with those women, telling me that I was a fool for thinking that. He informed me that I would be heading to a 6th world now. Sliding me a piece of paper, I was instructed to write down a superpower I would want to have as I would need it where I was going. Asking for context, so I could plan accordingly, he informed me that I was going to the My Hero Academia world. Why that world is full of heroes, what could need fixing there? I questioned. That is what you need to go find out. The God of creation has told me that something strange is happening to many worlds in our domain. He has instructed me to send a capable person to investigate the situation, and fix things. That's where you come in, he told me as he got up from his seat. Write down the power you want, and the reincarnation system will handle the rest. I have a date with the goddess of beauty, so I can't hang around here. Leaving me standing in his office, he left without saying anything else. Glaring at the door, I wanted to kill him so badly for ruining my life 5 times. As I was thinking about how I could do that, an idea came to mind almost immediately. Due to me never actually dying, every life I lived carried my stats and skills over from the previous lives. While I was extremely overpowered, I was still a long way off from being able to kill a god. All I need to do is gain more power, then I can kill him, I thought, looking at the paper. I have to think of something that won't raise any flags with him, but honestly, he hasn't realized he made me into a monster yet. With the power at my fingers currently and a good power, I can easily wipe that shit smirk off his face. Making myself to be Superman, Dr. Manhattan, or even Galactus was not an option. They would stand out far too much. I had to go with something more reasonable that could get better over time. Thinking back on all the video games and comics I read before this all started, one series stood out among the rest. Infamous. Delsin Ro's ability to take powers from other superpowered people would suit my needs perfectly, and if I combined it with Cole McGrath's power, I knew I could amass enough power to kill the god of reincarnation. I have to word this right though, obviously. MHA doesn't have someone on a god's level, but if I change my wording around I can use it in other universes. I thought, there is bound to be someone that can open a portal to another world. That is the key to gathering power to kill that rat bastard. writing the request down, I made sure to give myself some flexibility. Delson's power on its own was good, but I wanted to make it better. From now on I wanted to be able to take abilities/powers, copy abilities/powers, bestow abilities/powers on others, and destroy abilities/powers of others at will. Adding on Cole's ability to control electricity and his future powers, I would easily be able to gather strength in secret till I was ready. In addition, I made sure to add that my powers were conduit-based and that I could use any element under my control to recharge my powers. Submitting the paperwork, the scenery around me changed almost instantly. MHA World - finding myself sitting at a dining room table, it appeared this time I didn't have to go through the pain of growing up from a baby. This time around I appeared to already be 5 or 6 years of age. Looking around the room, my family appeared to be pretty well off as the home was very well furnished. "Cole, is everything okay?" the woman I assumed was my mother asked. "Yeah, I am just a little tired," I lied. "I told you that your father is overworking the poor boy." My mother scolded my dad. "It's fine dear, I went through the same training as a child too. Give him some time to adjust, he will be used to it in a week or so," my dad assured her. "He won't be a hero if he doesn't train." Hearing the word hero brought up made my skin crawl. Having been the world savior 5 times already, I wasn't in any hurry to make this world my 6th time. My only goal now was to thrive in this world. That said, it appeared that I could use my family's wealth to increase my training and prepare for things in the future. I have told you several times now, it's Cole's decision whether or not he wants to be a hero. Just because your father and you are doesn't mean he wants to be. 1. My mother said, "Cole, tell your mother you want to be a hero." My dad instructed me. "I don't want to be a hero," I replied, "I just want a normal life." Staring at me blankly, my father seemed to be at a loss for words. Based on the flow of this conversation, I assumed he thought I'd want to be a hero. "That was a funny joke, son," my dad said, laughing off what I told him. Letting out an inaudible sigh, I realized I ended up in one of those dynastic hero families. It was clear I was going to have no say in my future if it had nothing to do with heroics, so I just had to tolerate it till I turned 18. Once I was an adult I could leave and start tracking down useful quirks to help me. If the people happened to be villains, I would do the world a favor and either kill them or destroy their quirk. Leaving it at that for the evening, I didn't feel like arguing with them. Heading to my room, I decided to do some digging into the family I was born into. A quick Froggle search brought up everything I needed to know who we were. The family I was born into was the Bolt family, and unsurprisingly all the men in the family carried electric-based quirks. Our heroic line started back 5 generations in the late 21st century. My ancestor was one of the first heroes to form an agency that has been passed down every generation to the eldest son. Currently, my father was the head of the agency as my grandfather retired a few months after my birth. So I am a little over 6 years old, I thought reading my bio online. Says here I am my parents' only child, and I am some sort of prodigy when it comes to electricity. That explains why he is so insistent I become a hero. Too bad for him I won't be. Doing further research on things, I wanted to get an idea of what that bastard was talking about when he said there were issues down here. There weren't any ongoing wars, no plagues, no famine, no uprisings, and no world-ending events coming for the planet. As far as I could tell, everything was as it should be, but maybe the issue hadn't started yet. Confirming that things were fine in Japan, I walked over and laid down on my bed. The article said that I am recently privately educated. I thought, I wonder what the fuck I am in for tomorrow. Fortunately, it's a Friday, so I only have to sit through a single day before I am off for the weekend. Next day. Following my body's normal routine in this world, my parents and I were out the door by 7 a.m. Sitting in the back of their car, I was disappointed that this futuristic world didn't have flying cars or anything one would expect in the year 2400. Sitting quietly in the back seat, we were at the agency by 7:30 a.m. Parting ways with me at the front desk, I just sat and waited for someone to come to get me. "Cole, why are you just sitting there?" an older gentleman said coming out of the elevator a few minutes later. you gave your grandpa a heart attack. You have to kidding me, he's my teacher. I thought, sorry, just wanted to see what you would do. I swear you act more and more like your father every day. He laughed. Come on, we have work to do. Taking me upstairs to a conference room, he sat me down and had me go over some coursework for kids my age. This was another one of my least favorite things about this process, being forced to sit through boring lectures. 5 lifetimes had given me enough experience and knowledge to easily make me one of the smartest people in the world. Sliding the papers back a few minutes through the Omniverse as a conduit / Chapter 1, My Sixth Life 0.93%, Cole, how did you get this all done? It usually takes you at least 2 hours to finish your schoolwork, he inquired. I figured that if I try extra hard, maybe you will let me pick a different career path. I lied, I don't want to be a hero. Sighing, he told me that my father and him felt the same way when they were my age. Living up to the family legacy was a tough burden to bear, but they both eventually accepted it when they graduated high school. Explaining to me that we had offices all over the country, he went on to say that if I didn't take the agency over as an adult, everyone we employed would lose their jobs. Assuring me I would understand what that meant when I was older, I just stared at him with frustration. So basically you guilt trip your family into doing this to keep everyone employed. What a great family I have, I thought. With the school work done, my grandfather took me out to the training ground to hone my quirk. Chapter 2, Birthday Party. Our main location, the one we were at currently, consisted of several thousand square acres of land which was mostly used to reconstruct a small city. The training grounds was what they called the city. It was where all of the sidekicks and heroes in our employment trained when they weren't on duty. Admiring how accurate everything was, my grandfather told me to focus for a moment. Now then, you are too young to get into combat training. If I taught you now, your grandmother and mother would have my hide. Since that is off the table for the time being, what skills would you like to practice? He asked me. Isn't the teacher the one that comes up with lessons? I thought, can we maybe work on parkour or something like that? Where did you learn that word? He questioned. Someone on HeroTube mentioned it. Some heroes use it to chase criminals, scale buildings, and subdue their opponents, I replied, nodding his head. He accepted that answer as HeroTube was an up-and-coming platform some of the younger heroes used to gain popularity with the public. The only reason I knew the name was because of all the online ads I saw while researching my family. Agreeing to that, we spent the day refreshing the parkour skills that I hadn't used since I was an assassin. Training up till 5 p.m., my grandfather called it a day as he was about to keel over. Telling me that I had done a good job today, he patted me on the shoulder with a proud smile. You are far more energetic than your father was, he laughed as we walked back to the office. Did I ever tell you how I had to bribe your father with ice cream to get him to train? Back when he was your age, all he wanted to do was play video games. He never wanted to train himself or his quirk. Listening to his story, it seemed like my father was quite the lazy child, as were my uncle and aunt. From what he told me, it appeared that my uncle ran a very successful law firm and my aunt was a big wig at some tech company. Neither of them was bitter with my father for taking the family company. In fact, they supposedly pitted him as he didn't have a choice in the matter. Ending the story as we entered the building, my parents were patiently waiting for us at the front desk. How was his training? Dad asked. He ran circles around me. I must be getting old, Grandpa chuckled. Cole here is a natural. I believe he has a bright future ahead of him. That's good to hear. Dad replied with a smile. Cole, we have a party to attend tomorrow. A friend of mine's daughter is turning 5 tomorrow and they invited you to attend with us. Nodding my head, I pretended to be excited but I wasn't. In 4 of my 5 previous lives, I had attended countless parties for children just because they were the offspring of my supporters. Most kids were spoiled rotten little shits that used their parents' clout to get away with many things. If I had been allowed to raise my children, they wouldn't have gotten away with a fraction of what other children did. Leaving it at that, I said goodbye to my grandfather and went home with my parents. Next day getting to sleep in a bit. I woke up at 8 a.m. and got to work researching things on my computer. Since our family had branches all over the country, I had access to the records for every employee's quirk. If there were any useful/powerful quirks in our agency, I wanted to make a copy of them for my personal use. For the time being, I would stick to using electricity-based feats, but slowly integrate other powers into my arsenal. I had smoke, light, concrete, video, ice, and napalm powers at my disposal currently, with a host of other powers just waiting for me to discover them. Each would take some getting used to and would have to be trained in secret till I could control them better. Napalm would be reserved solely for criminals I didn't mind killing, as it was lethal every time unless the person was fireproof. No one at our main office has anything that stands out. Most of them are useful for crime fighting, they're just not useful for killing a god or people. I thought, let's check out my dad's friends. Trying to granularly search through results, I realized just how famous we were. The hero ranking system wasn't fully in place yet, so there was just the unofficial list. And my dad was in the top 5. Unable to check who were genuine friends and who was riding his coattails, I had to accept I was into this even blind. King, leaving my room, I went down and had a bowl of cereal for breakfast and watched some TV. Unsurprisingly, there were a ton of hero cartoons with little to nothing else on the airwaves. This culture of heroism was good for the public, but it made me sick, as I knew deep down only a small portion of heroes were good people. For the majority of heroes, it was a job that paid handsomely the more crime they stopped. It's the same wherever I go, I mumbled. I just wish they had Big Chungus or something else. The first world I end up in with television only has superhero cartoons. Finishing my bowl of cereal in a hurry, I shut off the television and tried to think of what I could do today before the party. As I was looking at my collection of books, my mother came in to check on me. Telling me that we would be leaving in an hour for the party, I inquired about why we were going so early. We have grown-up things to attend to, she replied, then left my room. Tossing all my plans out of the window, I got changed and went to sit in the living room. 2 hours later. Cole, I want you to behave yourself. There will be very important people here that support our agency. Do your best to get along with their children, they will friends in the future, my dad told me as we pulled up to the valet by the parking booth. Getting out of the car, my parents made themselves scarce, leaving me all alone. Wandering around the party looking at everyone, I had no idea who any of these people were. Since I knew only bits and pieces of the storyline in Japan, everything here in the States was unknown to me, except that show-off Chris skyline. Grabbing a plate of chicken wings, I sat away from everyone else, surveying the area, due to multiple attempts on my life in 2 of my past transmigrations. I didn't like sitting out in the open. I preferred sitting in secluded areas where I could easily watch my surroundings without fear of being stabbed in the back. As I was watching everyone, I saw a group of kids walking out with a girl who I assumed this party was for. She looked like the typical spoiled brat I was accustomed to seeing at parties. Watching her walk up to my parents, my dad started scanning the area for me. Hearing him call out for me a few moments, I wanted to immediately go home. Heading to the buffet first, I got another helping of food before heading over. Yes, Dad, I responded as I approached with another plate of wings. Ah, you were in line for food. He said with relief, Cole, this is Crystal, she is Herman Flint's daughter. Herman and I went to high school together, they are heroes like us. Hello Cole, it's nice to meet you, Crystal replied, offering her hand to me. Likewise, I responded as I shook her hand, suggesting I go play with her and her friends. I said I would do so after I finished my meal. Deciding that her time was more important than mine, she told me that they were just about to eat anyways and that I could join them. Pulling me away with her entourage, I looked at my dad, who was giving me a scolding look. Grabbing their plates, all of us sat down to eat together, though I still sat on the edge of the group. Why are you sitting over there? We don't bite, Crystal assured me. I am fine here, I responded. Moving next to me, she told me that it wasn't good to be by myself. Changing my initial assessment of her, I now thought she was one of those goody people that tried to push themselves on everyone. Tuning her out, I just ate my wings in silence, which seemed to irritate her. After 10 minutes of no response from me, she snapped. Why are you being mean to me? She shouted, looking at her with a confused look. I asked her why she would say something like that. Saying that I was just eating my food quietly didn't mean I was being mean to her. Glaring at me, it was clear she didn't like being ignored at all. Before I knew it, she opened her mouth and screamed at me. Realizing that she was using her quirk too late, I was sent flying by her hypersonic voice, Crystal. Her father barked, "What do you think you are doing?" "He was being mean to me," she said. "Cole was just eating his food," he retorted, having been watching us out of the corner of his eye. "I have told you several times that you can't use your quirk right next to someone. You could kill someone with your quirk if you aren't careful." I was trying to be nice, but he wasn't talking to me, she cried. "I am sorry," lecturing her about her behavior. He spanked her and told her that didn't give her the right to use her quirk on me. Barely able to hear what they were saying, my ears were still ringing from her attack. Thanks to my increased durability from being a conduit and from my stats, other than the ringing, I was completely unharmed. Dusting myself off, I looked at her in disdain. If we were adults, I would have fried her for pulling a stunt like that. Since we were kids though, it wasn't worth it to do anything. Her father was taking care of it, which was all that mattered. That said, if we ever did step in the ring in the future, would return this favor tenfold. Other than my lovers, in all my lives, I had no problem dishing out beatings to any gender. "Cole, are you okay?" Mom shouted as my hearing returned to normal. "Yes Mom, I am fine, my ears only hurt for a few moments," I assured her, though I knew that wasn't going to cut it. Agreeing with her, my parents carried me away from the party. As we were leaving, I watched Crystal get sent to her room for a timeout, hospital dash, having doctors run a battery of tests on me. My parents watched through the window as I got poked and prodded by a nurse and doctor. Satisfied that I was completely unharmed, the doctor walked out to tell them while the nurse got me a lollipop. I half wanted to tell her that I didn't want one, but that was something no child would say no to. Accepting it from her, I walked out of the room to my parents. "You sure he is fine?" my dad asked the doctor. "David, I have patched you up more times than I can count. Your son is in perfect health." That said, if he really did get hit by Crystal's quirk and walked away unharmed, his quirk isn't only electrical based. I suspect he either has increased durability or a healing factor, the doctor told them. Looking at me with a concerned expression, I asked them if we could go home now. Letting out a sigh, my parents thanked the doctor and took me home. Chapter 3, Family Turmoil. A few months later dash, as expected, relations with my family and the Flints were tense for a while. As my parents' only child, they took the matter incredibly seriously, as any normal child would have been critically injured by her actions. After several repeated apologies from Crystal's parents and herself, my parents forgave them but kept a close eye on her from then on. I had expected my mother to fight back more, but one day she just stopped for some reason. Training with my grandfather was irritatingly slow, and that was due in part to my overly protective grandmother and mother. Both of them felt that combat training wasn't needed yet, as I was only 6 years old. My grandfather and dad argued I was ready with them, but both relented when their wives threatened to stop talking to them. That said, I felt there was some tension between my mother and father afterwards. "It reminds me of Celestial and I thought as I ate lunch, that elf used that on me every time we saw a festival on our journey. She loved stuffing her face with steak on a steak and kettle corn." "Everything okay Cole? You look sad," my grandfather asked. I am fine," I lied, realizing that my facial expression reflected my depressed thoughts. "I am just upset we can't do any combat yet. Your mother and grandmother said you can start practicing when you are 12. He assured me. Parkour training was of little use to me now, as I had worn the rust off my. The only reason I was still training was that if I went all out, my grandfather might have an actual heart attack trying to keep up. Trying to think of a way to get some physical training in, an idea came to mind. Instead of pitching it as combat training, I could spin it as self-defense training, since my parents had a lot of enemies. Pitching him the idea, he seemed on board with it almost immediately. "That is a very good point," he admitted. "Your father was almost kidnapped on several occasions, so your grandmother should be for it." Calling her first, he explained what I was asking him for. Reminding her of several attempts on my father's life as a child, she conceded that it was something that I should know as I was only able to run at the moment, as far as she knew. After several more calls between my parents and grandparents, we got the green light to proceed. So what sort of self-defense training do you want to do? He inquired. Are you wanting martial arts training, weapon training, or something else? Can we train with my quirk? I might not be as strong as some villains out there, so learning to control my power will help me greatly. I replied, playing on my childlike appearance. All right, let's get going then. He chuckled, talking me to the replica baseball stadium. He assured me that I could cut loose here. Everything around us was metal, so there was no need to worry about a stray bolt of electricity hurting anyone out training in the replica city. Flipping on the power to the stadium, I could feel all the power sources around me ready to charge me up. All right, Cole, we don't know how your quirk works exactly, so take it easy so you don't hurt your dash, he said before I tried pulling the electricity to me. I was surprised by how easy it was to pull the electricity into my body. Unlike Cole, who had to be close to drain electricity, it appeared I was more than capable of pulling it towards me from quite a distance from me. Having a vague sense of when I was fully charged, I cut off the supply as I would only waste it. Now. My word, he gasped, what did you just do? I gathered electricity into me, I replied as I watched small arcs of lightning dance around my body. Interesting. Your father and I can only use electricity nearby to fight, that's why we usually carry battery packs on us. If you can store it internally, you won't need to worry about that, he said with excitement. You already have a leg up on your old man and me. I will still want one though. Kessler had one that he wore like a chest plate, I think. I thought, I will need it in case I am in a situation where none of my elements are available. Besides which, Cole was generally weaker when electricity wasn't around. I don't want to be in that position. I need to always be in top condition. Starting with the basics, I started shooting bolts of lightning out at some of the seats in the stands. Hitting them wasn't that difficult at all. I even confirmed that I could hit any target so long as I was able to see it. When it came to more precision shots, it did take a bit more focus to ensure it didn't miss its target. The precision shot would take some getting used to, but I was confident that I could use it consistently with a few weeks of training. Grandpa, is there a pitching machine here? I asked. I want to try some things out. Absolutely, let me pull it out for you. He agreed, walking to the closest edge of the field. Wheeling it out of the storage shed for me, I told him to load it up and aim it at me. Since I was about 30 feet away, he was comfortable with it and did as I asked. Turning it on once the balls were loaded, I created a shield out of electricity and started to approach. The moment one of the baseballs hit the shield, it burned away, leaving not even ash behind. What did you do? He shouted. What is that thing you are making? It's the shield. I think it's made out of plasma, I replied as I dropped the shield and created plasma blades on both forearms. Rushing forward, I sliced the baseballs to pieces as they flew towards me. Bobbing and weaving my way forward as they flew towards me, my body felt extremely light, just like in the old days. Whipping my arms around to bisect every ball that flew at me, Grandpa turned the machine off a split second before I destroyed it. Looking at me in shock, I realized I had probably overdone it a bit with the demonstration, but decades of training kicked in and I acted on instinct. You really are a prodigy. Where did you learn how to do that? He asked me, with concern. That is certainly not something I taught you. I did what came naturally to me, I replied honestly. There are a few more things I want to try, testing the electric rockets and grenades I could generate. I was delighted that everything was so easy to do. That said, the more I did, the more my grandfather looked at me with mixed emotions. It was understandable. He saw what I could do and was worried about what would happen if I went down the wrong path. I wanted to tell him that I had no desire for world conquest, but that wouldn't settle his nerves, it would just make it worse. I think that is enough training for today, Cole. Let's go get some ice cream, he suggested, accepting his offer. Since I didn't want to push him any further, we left the stadium and got ice cream. 3 RD person POV after Cole had gone to bed. His grandfather explained what had occurred at the stadium. Telling them about how powerful Cole was, everyone looked a bit nervous about what he was saying. Giving them every detail of what happened in the stadium, the women were noticeably worried about this. You don't think someone has been training him on the side, do you? What if one of our enemies has been brainwashing Cole? Cole's mother gasped. I told you repeatedly not to push this on him, but you refused to listen to me. Cole doesn't want to be a hero. She's right, villains nowadays aren't the same as they were when we were crime fighting. Cole's grandmother agreed. This isn't the same world it was when David was a boy. Villains will do whatever it takes to hurt a hero's family. Why can't you two just respect his wishes? The men were at a loss for what to say to that. They wanted to argue that he'd grow into the position as they did, but that argument never worked with their wives. That said, the possibility that Cole might be being manipulated behind the scenes was a very real possibility. Leaving the table to check on him, the women left the father and son pair at the kitchen counter. What do you think, Dad? David asked. You think he is being manipulated? I think he is bitter for being born into this family. It's a lot tougher on a hero's child now than when you were a boy, Cole's grandfather admitted. When you were a kid, they called you my son or called you David. With Cole, he is called the Bolt family heir. Hardly anyone calls him by his name. Maybe we should accept his answer, and close shop when you retire. I don't want Cole to resent us when he is older. I didn't think about that, David said, looking at his glass of wine. Surely our employees don't call him that, right? Telling him that they do, Cole's grandfather went on to say they called him their future boss. Seeing where things would start to wear a young boy thin, David felt frustrated he hadn't seen it sooner. If someone was preying on Cole's bitterness, it was his fault for not quashing it sooner. You know, we can't stop it now. Cole has to take the family business over. There are a lot of negative effects that will happen if we close shop, David stated. How about Cheryl and I start helping out with his training? We can make it a family activity. Maybe that will help him out, I guess. Let's not jump the gun quiet yet. Cole's grandfather laughed. How about slowly working up to that point? If you suddenly change everything, not only will the agency be in chaos, but he might resent you further. Try starting with spending family time with him, doing things he wants to do. He is a young Bob, so see if he likes working on things or maybe even sports. Bond with him, dude. Yeah, you are right, David chuckled. We never did finish restoring that really old 20th century sports car. Maybe Cole and I can finish that with you. Nodding his head in agreement, his father agreed that was a splendid idea. Returning from checking on Cole, David told his mother and Cheryl what he wanted to do. Wholeheartedly agreeing to the plan, everyone was on board with how they would bring Cole back from the path he was on. Getting a jump on things, David called his intelligence team to start running background checks on all of Cole's friends and former teachers. He wanted to find the person responsible for corrupting his son and make them pay dearly for it. Chapter 4, Hero Dilemma, 10 years later, after the first time using my power, my family became quite clingy to me. My parents started showing an interest in learning my hobbies and going out on more family outings. Knowing that it was their attempt at trying to prevent me from becoming a villain, I played along with them and actually enjoyed some quality family time with them, something I never had in my prior lives. It was nice to see what a normalish family felt like after so many centuries of never having one myself. My education changed as well. My parents started taking active roles in my training. Between my father and grandfather, I mastered many of the electrical techniques that I inherited from Cole McGrath. In addition to that, I unlocked the ability to convert my body into electricity and literally flow through conductive materials at near light speeds. Of course, this ability made my parents nervous, but eventually, they learned to trust that I had no evil intentions in mind for its use. As far as training my other powers, I had to train them in private. My family wouldn't have understood where the powers came from, as no one in my biological history had anything similar. Once I perfected the ability to convert myself into electricity, I donned a vigilante costume and used criminals as training dummies. On more than one occasion I left criminals crippled or disabled, as my concrete and napalm powers were simply too powerful for most people to withstand. That said, after several months of training, I slowly gained control over my power output and fewer criminals were being seriously injured. The Nightwalker strikes again, my father read on the newspaper's front page. Why is the public still backing this person? They have been active now for 3 years, and still, the public and the reporters treat him like he's some sort of angel. Dear, he has done quite a lot of good for the community. though he has gone overboard on several occasions, my mother said as I made breakfast. Someone needs to bring him in. Last night he brought an entire building down on a group of criminals. My father fumed. Fortunately no innocent people were harmed, but bringing an entire building down on them was way too excessive. Glancing at the article as I walked past, I pointed out that the group was making deadly quirk-boosting drugs. Looking at me as I took a seat, my father asked what I thought of the Nightwalker. He hadn't brought it up with me directly before, but as I grew older he liked to pose situational questions to test me. I don't know, like Mom said they are doing a lot of good for the community, I replied. Was the organization even on your radar? They were, but we were still in the investigation stage. Fortunately, no one at our agency was caught in the collapse. He told me, do you think he should be brought in, unless someone else is going to watch the streets better at night? I don't think it's a good idea, I remarked. I mean, look at the city. The mayor said recently that night crimes are down almost 70%. He attributed most of that to the Nightwalker's activity. You can't argue with the results. Looking at me with concern, my parents told me that crippling and killing people was wrong. Letting out a sigh, I pulled out a paper I was writing for my English course. Tossing it on the table, I looked at my dad with a serious expression. Grandpa had me do a research paper on villains in other countries. Since you intend to expand the family agency internationally, I advised for background, Japan has a villain called All for One. His quirk allows him to steal quirks from others for himself. He's destroyed the lives of thousands by stealing their quirk or by the destruction he causes when fighting heroes. His body count easily reaches 5 digits. And yet every time someone fights him they only try to catch him. In my book, they should be trying to kill him, not subdue him. Some people just can't be saved, and those people need to be put down for the safety of everyone else. Cole, you shouldn't say that. Everyone deserves a second chance at life, my mother argued. Tell that to the thousands of people that lost a part of themselves or loved ones to All for One. How many people have to suffer before someone is willing to put someone down? I questioned. He isn't the only one either. There are dozens of villains that kill hundreds of people every year with no remorse, but heroes only try catching them alive. It just seems like killing a few villains of their caliber would send a strong message to the rest of them. Staring at me in shock, I realized they hadn't experienced any life or death situations. This was the usual reaction when I spoke about my views with other people in my past lives, so I had to approach this from a logical point of view. I am not saying all repeat offenders should be killed, I am saying villains of this caliber should be open season. You can't say that heroes haven't given them plenty of opportunities to surrender themselves. This guy named Argo from Russia has been given over 100 chances to surrender to authorities but never does. He is a mercenary with no moral compass. He does whatever the highest bidder wants and sometimes thousands die because of him. I said, showing them documents to back up what I was saying. A man like Argo is too for rehabilitation to work. He's killed too many people, far gone. Smacking me across the face, my dad was even more pissed off now. Unfortunately, he wasn't willing to listen to reason on this. It just wasn't something he could comprehend till he was in that situation. I understand that you are only 16 years old, but don't ever let me hear you talk that way again. Life is a sacred thing. Don't be so quick to kill villains just because it's the easy thing to do, he lectured me. As heroes we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard than everyone else. We can't be judge, jury, and executioner for villains. That is the court's job and duty. That is exactly how I thought early on as the hero in my first life. I tried to reason with everyone no matter what walk of life they came from. 99% of the time I was successful with that, but some people were just too stubborn to be reasoned with. That 1% were the ones that showed me some people do need to be killed. One example of that was humanity's king at the time, King Arnoth. Having brought representatives from every race, no matter how small, together to negotiate peace, King Arnoth refused to compromise on anything. He was of the mindset that humanity should be at the top of all the races and that everyone else should be slaves to us. I completely disagreed with him, stating that humanity was just as flawed as every other race and that to survive we had to all work together. My words fell on deaf ears, and he ultimately tried to assault the Elf King's daughter one night to exert what he felt was his right. I ended up decapitating him in front of the elven representatives, and it was at that point I realized some people couldn't be reasoned with. Showing the races that I was willing to lay it all on the line for peace was what brought everything together. A few more misguided individuals fell to my blade, but ultimately peace won out. No, only that, I got several wives out of it too. I couldn't have pulled it off, without them. I thought, standing up from my seat, I respect and see your point of view, but I don't see a peaceful future with that way of thinking. You and I may never agree on this. That said, we both want the same end result. If you will excuse me, I will head to class now. Leaving my parents behind, I took the bus to the agency. The rest of the day went by pretty quickly. Unlike my father, my grandfather wasn't so quick to shoot down my idea. Debating the topic for the entire day, ultimately he was convinced I wasn't some sort of sociopathic hero that wanted to kill every villain I met. I wished my father was as level-headed as my grandfather was. It would make things a lot easier for me. That evening, after we finished celebrating my 16th birthday, I headed out into the city once everyone was asleep. It was a pretty quiet night, so I had time to reflect on everything. Taking a seat on a rooftop, I pulled the few photos of the women I would have married. In all my past lives I had a few people close to me that I could confide in. But this time I had no one. I had no close friends, and my family was out of the question as they were too sensitive on most topics. The older I get, the harder dealing with this shit becomes. I chuckle to myself. You never realize the side effects of living for such a long time. Since things were going slow tonight, I pulled out a pen and paper to start drawing up a schematic for making a replica version of Kessler's armor. As I wasn't the greatest at mechanical engineering, this design would probably be altered quite a lot by whoever built it. Something like this would have to be sent off to Island for construction just to avoid dealing with my parents. I will also have to earn money for it too. I groaned. My money from previous lives is no good here. If I pay with gold bars, people will think I robbed a bank. Knowing that I was going to need a lot of cash for my suit, I decided to look around for a good-paying job. Sure, I could work for my family and earn money, but I didn't want to give them false hope that I'd take over the agency. Eventually, 4 years later, with the goal of making the armor in mind, I ended up taking a job with the electric company helping build out the power infrastructure throughout the county. My quirk allowed me to work around high-voltage equipment while it was live, which was something only a small number of people could do. Fortunately, my parents didn't fight me on taking the job as they knew my quirk kept me safe from danger, and they were proud I got a job. To begin with, Cole, we need to talk, my dad said, walking into my room. I need you to Japan with your grandfather to open up our first international branch. Seriously, I sighed as I submitted my order request to Island. We have been over this, Dad. I don't want to be a hero. I know that, son. Originally your grandparents were supposed to go, but your grandmother, he stumbled, with your grandmother's recent passing, Grandpa isn't doing so well. As the head of the agency, I can't go with him, but, acknowledging that Grandpa's mental health wasn't in a good place at the moment, I knew my dad was right. Having grown fond of the old man, I didn't want to see him sent off somewhere alone after having lost his wife to cancer. I don't have a hero license though. I can't really help him out that much, I advised. No worries, I pulled some strings to get you one, Dad said, tossing me an international license. When you get to Japan you will need to register a hero name with the Hero Association. Realizing that he had planned this out, I could only groan in frustration. I will go, but I want to make it crystal clear that I am not inheriting the agency. While I am there I am helping Grandpa and taking in the sights, I told him. With that, I was on my way to Japan. Chapter 5, International Debut, Cole POV-. Watching the clouds roll by as we approached Japan, I couldn't believe I got suckered into this bullcrap. I told myself I wouldn't get pulled into being a hero again, but here I was with an international hero license helping my family expand the agency internationally. It wasn't really that bad though. I had a new pool of quirks to tap into now which would come in handy. Not only that, All for One is a buffet of quirks just waiting for the taking, I thought, hiding a grin beneath my hand. There are others here that can help me get stronger, especially Eri. I can take out that bastard Chisaki, take his quirk, and make a copy of Eri's quirk. It will mesh well with my time-traveling power, whenever I can awaken it. Cole, I know you didn't want to be a hero, but I asked him to send you with me, Grandpa said with an apologetic look. If I didn't, he was going to try to marry you off to Crystal. He is really bent on having Herman's agency merge with ours. Looking at him in shock, I clenched my fist in anger. My father had no damn respect for my wishes, and it was beginning to wear thin on my nerves. Letting out a sigh, I thanked him as this was a much better alternative to marrying that woman. Don't be too hard on him, he just wants to ensure the agency continues to be in the Bolt family. Grandpa told me, your cousins don't want it either, so this was the only option in his eyes. Let's not bother debating this now, I am not thrilled with either option. Do you know one of the big reasons I don't want to be a hero? I asked. No, he replied. When was the last time someone in the agency called me Cole beside my family? I inquired, taking a moment to think about it. He realized no one did. They all referred to me as the next generation of the Bolt family heroes or as David's son. Even at the age of 20 they still didn't call me Cole. It's only partially true, but it's really the only realistic thing I can tell him right now. I thought, Cole, I am sorry we didn't see it sooner. He apologized. What's done is done. For now, let's just focus on getting this done, I said, seeing the Toyko airport coming into view. Who knows, maybe I will meet someone here that doesn't treat me like a Bolt heir. With this outfit, I am sure to stand out enough without using the family name. Dressed to my recollection of Kessler, minus the cybernetic enhancements, I felt comfortable enough to hero here. Disembarking at a private terminal, a limo was waiting for us ready to go to the Hero Association branch office here in Tokyo. Driving through the city, it was refreshing to see that even in this world there was still an anime culture here. I could write light novels here based on my previous lives. I thought, seeing a business opportunity. Pulling up to the Hero Association building, Grandpa and I headed inside. The Tokyo branch was very different from the branches I visited in the States, but I wasn't going to complain as it was a nice change of pace. Walking up to one of the available agents, my grandfather and I flashed our licenses to identify ourselves. Oh my, it's an honor to meet both of you, the female agent said, shaking our hands. Headquarters already sent your information over to us. Mr. Bolt Sr., the branch chief will see you now. Motioning for one of the attendants to show him the way, I remained at the counter to finish my paperwork. Deciding to roll with the hero named Kessler, I put down that my quirk was called Conduit. Getting some other basic information like height, weight, and eye color from me, I was given my permanent license shortly after that. We look forward to working with you, she told me with a smile. Likewise, I replied with a polite nod. I wonder how many times she has to say that a day. I remember some of the guild attendants absolutely hated having to say it. Lots of perverts took it as an invitation to touch them. Going back to the limo, I got the address of our accommodations from the driver and said I would do some exploring. Telling me to be careful out there, I thanked him and headed off to the outskirts of Mizutofu. Zipping through the power lines, I arrived at our residence in moments. Seriously, Dad, I thought, looking at the mansion he bought. Way to keep a low profile. We are the outsiders here. And you purchase a mansion. Why the hell do we need something this big? Do you realize how expensive the upkeep is? Deciding not to go in, I wanted to walk around the city to take in some of the sights. Mizutofu was a much quieter city than I was accustomed to, which was a pleasant surprise. As I got into the more densely populated areas, I quickly took to the rooftops to survey my surroundings. Since I would be required to patrol every now and then, getting a proper layout of the city would be very handy. Seeing other heroes down below me, I didn't see really anything else going on. The school semesters were about to begin in a few weeks, so there were a lot of kids on the streets. Spending the last few days of freedom before returning to class, everyone was eager to enjoy themselves. As I was looking around the area, I heard a commotion down on the ground. Glancing down at the main street in front of the building I was on, I watched a Minotaur-looking guy burst out of the building across the street. Seeing bags of money in his left hand and a hostage in his right hand, I suspected the building was a bank. Using magic to translate what he was saying in real time, the cops were on the scene in moments. All of you stay back. If you don't, this woman is going to get it, he threatened, tightening his grip on the hostage's neck. Seriously, who the fuck says that shit? I thought, looking to see if any heroes would show up. Seeing a bunch of heroes I didn't know start showing up, I was pretty confident none of them were going to take him. By now the woman was pleading for the cops to back away, but they weren't about to let him go. If my guess was right, he had nearly $250,000 in hand, so they weren't letting him go. A Mexican standoff, I see. Well, better get to it, I guess, I thought with a sigh. Dashing into the outlet next to me, I appeared in the bank entryway and looked at him. The guy was probably about 7 feet tall at most and was jacked. Clearing my throat to get his attention, I politely asked him to let the woman go. Looking at me dressed in a long white trench coat, white suit, white scarf, and gray hood, he was probably confused, as I looked nothing like any hero he'd have seen. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted. "Name's Kessler, now let the lady go." "I won't ask you again," I replied. "You think you have the balls to take me, pipsqueak?" he roared. "I will chew you up and spit you." Vanishing from place in a flash of light, I slammed my knee right under his chin. Feeling his jaw crack in several places, he momentarily lost consciousness, which was all I needed to extract the woman from his grasp. Jumping back out of his reach, I left her with the police as the villain recovered from the momentary blackout. Catching himself before falling to the ground, he looked around trying to find where the hostage, and I went, "Good morning, sunshine, have a nice nap," I harassed him. Anger, turning around to see me standing behind him, he glared at me full of throwing the money away. He charged straight at me, hellbent on trying to flatten me. "My apologies, I didn't realize the Bolt family was setting up a branch here in Japan," he said. "It's an honor to work with one of the best hero families in TH States. Please just call me Kessler," I told him with a smile. "We are in the process of finishing up the paperwork now, so please keep this on the down low." "I understand, I will let the boys know to keep an eye out for you," he replied, not listening to a word I said. Not wanting to get caught up in an interview, I zipped into a power line and slipped away without any problems. Reappearing a few streets away, I sat down and let out a sigh. That was really too easy. Being overpowered in a world like this sucks ass. I thought, rubbing the bridge of my nose. I have to constantly control my strength so I don't kill someone. A few moments later my phone started to ring out of nowhere. Pulling it out of my pocket, I saw that it was my grandfather calling me. Answering the phone, had to pull the phone from my ear as he was shouting through the phone, "That's my boy, Cole. I just saw the footage of your first hero act. You showed that villain what's what." He laughed with excitement. "Your parents are going to be so proud of you. Please tell me you didn't send it to them," I said, knowing they would go crazy. Feeling my phone vibrate, I saw that my parents were posting what happened all over social media. Realizing that I was now going to be identified as one of the Bolts now, I told my grandfather that I had to go. Telling him I would see him tonight, I ended the call and leaned back. Seeing the comments start pouring in, the cat was out of the bag and my attempt to stay separated from the Bolt name went out the window. I tried to warn them, when I have to start killing villains, it's going to come back on the family, not just me. I thought before something else clicked. Shit, I am going to have to make a few trips back home. If the Nightwalker disappears after I leave, it will certainly raise some red flags. I will keep it up for a few weeks, then stop it completely. Picking myself back up, I continued my patrol till my grandfather got to the mansion. That's all, folks.